You know that feeling when you look at the news and just think, wow, things are crazy right now? Well, you're definitely not the first. Way back in the 19th century, this incredibly influential preacher, J.C. Ryle, felt the exact same way. He looked around and saw a world that he believed was teetering right on the brink of a total crisis. So today, we're going to dive into the really urgent prophetic vision he laid out in his work, Coming Events and Present Duties. And this quote right here from 1867 just perfectly nails the mood. I mean, the horizon on all sides, so thoroughly black and lowering. He's basically saying things looked bleak. He saw chaos everywhere, in politics, in religion. And the big institutions that had been around forever, he thought they were just crumbling right in front of him. But this wasn't just him being a pessimist. Oh no. This deep sense of crisis was the very thing that fueled his entire message about what was coming next, and, more importantly, what people needed to do about it.
All right, so here's our game plan to really get inside his head. First up, we'll dig into his urgent warning. Then we'll unpack what he called his prophetic creed. After that, we'll look at his pretty sharp critique of what he called the sleeping church and the two big duties he said they needed to wake up and do. And we'll wrap it all up with a personal challenge he leaves for everyone.
Okay, so let's get into it. What exactly did Riles see that made him think the world was about to go off a cliff? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm of political chaos, society seeming to decay, and what he saw as this deep spiritual rot that was eating away at everything, both the church and the government. And he was super specific about his concerns. He looked at the big pillars of society, the government, the official church, and he just saw them as failing, totally failing. To him, all the chaos wasn't just political bickering. No, he saw it as a sign of something much deeper, like a terminal illness in society. So what was his conclusion? He basically said, it's time to stop trusting in people, in parliaments, in bishops. He believed that we humans just kind of mess up everything we touch, eventually. So for him, the only real hope wasn't in fixing our broken systems. It was in looking for something else entirely, the promised second coming of Christ. Now, this whole worldview, it wasn't just some vague, gloomy feeling he had. Not at all. Ryle built it on a really solid foundation of core beliefs. He actually laid them out in what he called his prophetic creed, which was basically his framework for understanding not just what was happening in his own time, but the entire story of history leading right up to the very end. All right, let's really break this down because this is the absolute heart of his argument. First, Ryle completely rejected the popular, optimistic idea that the world was just going to get better and better until it turned into some kind of perfect Christian paradise. He was like, nope. He argued the Bible actually predicts the opposite, that widespread unbelief is a sign that the end is near. This brings us to his next point. The main purpose of our time isn't to convert the whole world. It's to gather a specific group of believers, what he calls an elect people, from all over the globe. Then comes the main event, the real centerpiece, Christ's second coming. And for Ryle, this was going to be a real, literal, personal, bodily return, not some fuzzy metaphor. And only after that happens, he said, will the earth finally be renewed and justice will actually be served. So what's the bottom line here? It's this. Stop expecting people or governments to fix everything. Instead, get ready for some massive, world-shaking changes.
But here's the thing. Ryle's harshest words, they weren't for the politicians or the world outside. They were aimed squarely at the church itself. He saw this deep, dangerous indifference among Christians. They just didn't seem to care about the one thing he thought was most important, the return of Christ. To put it bluntly, he believed the church had completely fallen asleep at the wheel.
And to prove his point, to really drive it home, Ryle uses one of Jesus's most famous stories, the parable of the 10 virgins. For him, this wasn't just some old story from the past. He saw it as a living, breathing prophecy, describing the entire church, everyone who calls themselves a Christian, during this long period of waiting for Christ's return.
Okay, the symbols here are absolutely key to understanding what he's getting at. The 10 virgins? He says that's the whole visible church, everybody who says I'm a Christian. The bridegroom? That's Jesus, of course. The lamps they're holding? That's the outward stuff. Going to church, having the label Christian. But the oil? The oil. For Ryle, the oil was the whole point. It was the real deal, the genuine inner grace of the Holy Spirit.
And this is where he draws a very sharp line. The wise virgins, he says, didn't just profess to be Christians. They possessed a real faith. They had the oil. The foolish virgins,
Well, they had the lamp of religion. They looked the part, but there was no oil inside. They had the form, but not the substance. And that was Ryle's huge, stark warning. It is entirely possible to look like a Christian, to talk like a Christian, and to miss out on the real thing completely. Okay, now we get to what might be his most controversial point, because the parable says something really interesting. They all slumbered and slept, not just the foolish ones, all 10. Ryle took that and ran with it. He said this showed a massive collective failure across the entire church. He believed that even the true, genuine believers had gotten lazy and indifferent about the second coming, treating it like some far-off theoretical idea instead of something that should change how they live right now. So if the whole church is dozing off, what's the wake-up call? Well, Ryle wasn't the kind of guy to just point out a problem without offering a solution. He had a very clear two-part prescription. 2 essential duties for any Christian who wanted to be ready when that midnight cry came. Duty number 1 is simple: watch. And let's be clear, he didn't mean staring at the sky or trying to predict dates on a calendar. For Ryle, watching is an active thing. It's like being a soldier on guard duty. You're on high alert, moment by moment. It means you're watching out for sin in your own life, you're on guard against false teachings, and you're actively fighting that spiritual laziness he saw all around. It's about living your life as if Christ could literally walk through the door at any second. And the second duty is the perfect partner to the first: occupy till I come. This comes from a different parable, and it's really important to know that the old meaning of the word occupy was basically to do business. It was an active entrepreneurial word. So this isn't about just sitting around and waiting. It's about actively investing everything you've got, your time, your money, your skills, your influence, for God's glory while you wait for the boss to get back. And this is so important to get. Ryle's message was the exact opposite of telling people to just drop out of society. He wasn't saying, quit your job and go live on a mountain. Not at all. He was calling people to be more diligent, more engaged, more purposeful in their everyday lives. He wanted them to use every single gift they had for the master's business precisely because the master was about to return. Which brings us to the final point, the real heart of Ryle's entire message. After he's talked about the state of the world, after he's laid out his beliefs, after he's called out the sleeping church, he brings it all home with one single, incredibly personal question. So, what does it actually mean to be ready? According to Ryle, it has nothing to do with predicting a date. It's all about the state of your heart. Being ready means you have that oil, that real, genuine faith, not just the empty lamp of saying you're a Christian. It means you've been genuinely changed from the inside out. You're living a life that's prepared for anything: death, judgment, and yes, that sudden second coming. At the end of the day, it's about having a faith that makes you ready to meet God face to face at any given moment. And so we're going to end this exactly where Ryle ended his message. He doesn't leave you with a complicated timeline or a bunch of predictions. He leaves you with one simple, sharp, unavoidable question. He believed all the theology, all the warnings, all the duties, they all boiled down to this one thing. Forget about the chaos in the world for a second. Forget about the state of the church. He looks right at the individual and asks, are you ready?